We'll make a start if that's all right. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody, and particularly welcome to all of our guests. I think we're calling you Jenny's fan club. But if there's anybody that's not Jenny's fan club that is also a guest, welcome as well. So, without further ado, I will let Jenny doesn't need any introduction, does she? She's been here longer than me.
Yes, I'm
one of the founding members.
Founding member.
Jenny was my predecessor as Speaker Secretary, so and I've been doing it for 10 years, I think, haven't I?
Did it for about 9, I think.
Yeah. So between the two of us, imagine. Okay, can you, sorry, Doreen, can you whisper? Please. Or whoever's talking at your table, please whisper. Without further ado, Jenny is going to talk to us about the work that she's done and the research that she's done about a commander who lived in her house.
All right.
Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you.
Don't really need any
Thanks
more
very much, Sheila.
Jenny, we haven't got the microphone because the staff here can't find the power lead for it. If she does find it, then we'll have a quick pause and connect it up. But Jenny is going to have to talk fairly loudly, but can't talk really hard. So if you can't hear at the back, just wave.
Yes.
I'm going to sit at the back as well, so I'll see.
Okay.
I'll switch the lights off and let's get going.
Okay. All right, yeah. Well, good evening, everyone. I hope you don't mind me sitting down, but after a while, standing, my knees begin to complain. So I'm going to sit down and try and enjoy it. Right. And before I start, I'd like to thank my family for their help, especially my son Alan, who's sitting over there. Yeah, and he didn't take over, but he patiently put me back on track when the technology wouldn't behave as I wanted it to behave. My daughter, who kept encouraging me by FaceTime from America, and my granddaughter, who kept me laughing. And my daughter-in-law, mustn't forget you, Andrea, who was wise enough not to comment at all. Right, the hugely popular BBC Two series with David Olsugar, I can't pronounce, A House Through Time, demonstrated the fascinating stories that linger in the bricks of a house. Even in a property built recently, there is a history in the ground where it sits. House history relies on a lot of the same skills and records as family history, from census entries and trade directories and maps and electoral registers. However, it's also worth visiting your local archives to see what resources they also hold. Because many, including municipal plans, may not have been digitised. Staff may even have created a guide for house historians. Also, you can use local history books to build up a picture of the wider area. Look for the name of your road in the indexes. A New Year's aim could be to create a folder containing all the research you've uncovered that you can leave behind for the new residents when you move. I'm not thinking of moving, but I've got my neighbour here tonight. Right. This is my house, and yours, I think, as well. 3 Sandown Road. However, if you look closely, you may spot the name Prince Albert Villas. More on this later. It's not grand. It's a 3-storied early Victorian terraced house with a small garden. There is a small building behind the house which has, over the years, been a boathouse, a store, a garage, and now I have recreated it into a mock boathouse and craft room. My mother and father-in-law bought the house in 1978. By 2012, they both left this world, and my husband Richard inherited it. Shortly afterwards, we made the decision to move to Sandown Road from our house in Middledeal Road. In 2014, when my husband Richard died, I became the sole owner of the house. As with all communities, it is the people, not the buildings, that contribute to a house's history. This meant delving into Kent's 19th and early 20th century local and national history and further afield. Those of you who have researched your family history know how quickly you can collect ancestors. I decided to concentrate on one person, Robert Leal Germain, and his family, who had owned the house during the Edwardian era. What a remarkable family this turned out to be. Up to this period, most of my family history, the local history research has been concentrated in the north of England, where I was born and lived for 17 years. This project was an opportunity to expand my research further south. I've now lived in Kent for at least 3/4 of my long life and consider it home, but I'm not quite so sure if those born in Kent would agree. What sources can be found to help with the research of your home for this period? I was lucky enough to inherit a pile of old deeds for the house. I've brought some of them with me tonight, and you can have a look at them afterwards. On the schedule from 1904 to 1926 of number 1 and 2 Princess Albert Villas, they were owned by Edward John Germain. That's the schedule. Edward John Germain bought the house 1 and 2 Prince Albert Villa, now 3 and 5 Sandown Road, on 22nd of July 1912, and on his father's death in 1913, Robert inherited them, should I say. Without the old deeds from Hardman and Sons, I would not have known that the house numbering had changed and that 3 Sandown Road was formerly known as 1 Prince Albert Villas, also included 7 Alfred Square. So we have 1 Prince Albert Villa, also including 7 Alfred Square, anyone who knows that area. There is evidence of this past connection. An old pike still runs from my boathouse to number 7 Alfred Square, and I have the old land certificate in which number 7 Alfred Square was removed on 30th of August 1967, just before my mother and father-in-law bought the house. Otherwise, I would own 7 Alfred Square as well. This is a point to remember when you are researching your house. The house numbers and names, and even the roads they sit on, do change over time. And as you go back further in time, you may find that there is no road name, house name, or number at all. Excuse me. Which makes research a lot more difficult, For example, in the past, Sandown Road was an extension of Middle Street. This is an ongoing project and involves many occupants of my house from when it was built in the Victorian era to the present day. So far, for the time being, I have honed in on the family of Germain, and in particular, Robert Leal Germain. And this is him. This is the commander, or he was to become a commander. He might not have been one at this time. Robert was born on the 11th of November, 1882, in Halifax, Canada, the provincial capital of Nova Scotia. His father was Edward John Germain, who was born in Chatham, Kent, in 1837, and his mother, Maud Crichton, was born in Canada in 1849. His mother and father married in Canada in 1876. First, a little bit about his childhood. Robert, as I mentioned, had a British father and a Canadian mother. And as we were made aware in Mick Benier's interesting talk last month, for those of you who are here, a lot was going on between Britain and Canada during Robert's lifetime. In order to assess the Canadian records on Ancestry, I had to upgrade my subscription to Worldwide. Without this upgrade, I would not have found Robert's birth and death certificates. I will, however, only be touching on his dual connection in relation to his mother's Canadian family at this time, and won't be doing much about that. Out of their 8 children, Robert Leal Germain was the only one to be born in Canada, into this well-established naval family. He had 3 brothers and 4 sisters. As is probably expected in this period, it's easier to track the careers of the boys in the family rather than the girls. It's a shame, because poor girls, I would like to have known what they had done with their lives. Those of you may have, those who may have helped shape his life, excuse me. I'm trying to make my voice loud so that you can hear it at the back. Okay, thank you. Right, where was I? Those who may have helped shape his life and naval career included his grandfather, who was born on 17th of December 1817 and was a staff surgeon in the Royal Navy. He married Sarah Davis on 17th of May 1836 at St Mary's Church, Chatham, Kent. He received the Arctic Medal for Arctic service on HMS Dorothea, located in Canada. You may recall HMS Erebus and HMS Terror set sail from just outside London in 1845, hoping to chart a path to the Pacific Ocean by going over the Arctic Circle via the Northwest Passage. But both ships became trapped in sea ice, and their crews eventually died while wandering in the snowy wilderness searching for help. Very sad. Robert's grandfather's ship was probably involved in trying to chart this path as well, or find survivors or their remains. The Northwest Passage from the Atlantic to the Pacific Oceans was finally sailed by Ronald Amundsen in a 3-year expedition between 1903 and 1906. It had been achieved by Captain McClure in 1850 by sailing and sledging, but the first one, Ronald, did it just by sailing. On the 19th 1911 census, Robert's father, now a retired naval captain, aged 64, was living at Walmer Lodge, near Walmer Castle, with his wife Elizabeth Maud, aged 62. His youngest son, Harry Bingham, aged 25, and grandson, John Robert Germain McNamara. It is likely that initially Robert, aged 29, rented 3 Sandown Road as a shore residence when he wasn't at sea, and that his father later bought it for him in 1912. It is worth remembering that prior to the First World War, only about 10% of people owned their own homes. Robert's father, Edward John Germain, aged 12, on the 1851 census, was a pupil at the Naval College in Greenwich. He went on to have a distinguished career in the Royal Navy, and his childhood would have been steeped in nautical history. On the 1891 census, Robert was 7 years old. The family, who had 4 servants, a governess, a nurse, a cook, and a housemaid, were living at Beachlands, the Strand, Walmer. They couldn't have been in my house with all those. Formerly the property of Admiral Henderson. His father was aged 50 and a retired captain in the Royal Navy. His mother, Elizabeth Maud, was aged 42. His elder sister, Mary, was 13. Natalie was 9. Nora was 2. And his younger brother, Harry, was 5. His youngest brother, Philip, was not yet born, and his eldest brother, Edward, aged 15, who would have been, was not on the census and probably already in medical college. There was a governess, Mildred Carter, employed to school the young family, but I suspect Robert, a spirited youngster, probably had a great deal of freedom to roam around Walmer and mess about in boats on the seafront before going to Naval College. He would have played with mates from all backgrounds and learnt from the local fishermen and sailors. It would have become obvious to him that bravery comes in all guises, shaping his character and attitude to others for later life and his leadership role. After this freedom, he probably rebelled a little against the naval discipline, and he found his academic studies quite difficult, especially maths. When Robert was 17 years old and still at college, on the 24th of September 1899, the family suffered a devastating loss when Robert's eldest brother, Edward John Crichton Germain, aged 19, died. I found the record of his death on the UK Medical and Dental Students Registers, 1882 to 1937. He had 2 more younger brothers, Harry Bingham Germain, who also became a commander in the Royal Navy, married in 1916, and died in action just 10 months later, on 11th of November 1916. He was awarded an OBE. His younger brother, Philip Lloyd Lawless Germain, I don't know why he was lawless, a second lieutenant, RMLI, Portsmouth Battalion, was killed in action at Gallipoli, the Dardanelles, in June 1960. This family certainly made enormous wartime sacrifices, and these losses must have caused Robert tremendous sadness. Robert served as a captain in the Royal Navy and was also a captain in the Royal Canadian Navy. He gained 4 months' time on passing out of Britannia in September 1898. He first served in the second-class battalion battleship on the China station. How long did they travel? A long way, didn't they? And for his services, there were there with the Naval Brigade. He was recommended by the Commander-in-Chief, Vice Admiral Seymour, for accelerated promotion for conduct during service. In 1900, that was, and he was only aged 18. If you had seen the film Master and Commander, I'm sure most of us have, but you might recall the young officer who bravely gave orders to non-commissioned sailors twice his age. It wasn't easy. Robert took passage home in HMS Centurion in 1901. On the 1901 census, the family and servants were living at St. John's Park, Greenwich. He served on HMS Mars in the Channel until 1902, whilst continuing his studies at college. In June 1902, Robert was recommended officially for early promotion by Captain Jellicoe. That name might ring a bell with some of you. Recommendation to be specially considered when he had finished all his examinations, with a view to putting him on a par with those who had been noted for early promotion. Captain Jellicoe had reported that he had not very high abilities, but was a young officer of great coolness. Robert was named as an executor of his father's will in 1903 and gave his residence as 3 Sandown Road. At this time, he was appointed to HMS Hogue. At the beginning of the First World War, on the 22nd of September 1914, Hogue, together with her sister ships HMS Abaker and HMS Cressy, was sunk by the German submarine U-9. Although Robert was not at the time on the Hogue, it must have shaken him. He probably had a lot of contacts who had served on it. On the 15th of January 1904, Robert was promoted to the rank of lieutenant. He was 22 years old. In October 1907, aboard HMS Magnificent, he portrayed the title character of Jane, the housemaid, in a farce in 3 acts, which was logged on his record of service, suggesting he had a sense of humour and an aptitude for acting, perhaps. The comments in these reports from senior officers were not always complimentary, but discipline had to prevail. If a superior took a dislike to you, it could affect your promotion prospects. Perhaps nothing has changed in a hierarchical system, and this conflict has been the theme of many good films. The writing on Robert's reports is very small and difficult to read. However, from them, I suspect that his superior officers had considered, or may have considered, his way of managing a little too modern. For example, comments such as, "He is very much interested in the comfort and well-being of his men, is very considerate towards them and takes much trouble about their general welfare, sports, recreations, etc." He was ahead of his time, as this is something which would be expected now. On the 22nd of July 1912, Robert's father, Edward John Germain, bought 1 and 2 Prince Albert villas. In now Sandown Road. They were 1 and 2 at the time. Robert was promoted to the rank of Lieutenant Commander on 15th of January 1912, and he gave his residence as 3 Sandown Road. He was appointed to HMS Hercules of the 2nd Battle Squadron in February 1913. He was to leave for her command for the command of a sloop on the China station on the outbreak of war, but these orders were cancelled and he fought at the Battle of Jutland on HMS Hercules. Before HMS Hercules left for the war in Jutland, 2 major events happened in Robert's life. On the 21st of May 1913, his father, Edward John Germain, died and he was buried at sea. His obituary was held at Eastry Cemetery, locally, of course. Subsequently, Robert inherited 3 Sandown Road, and his forthcoming marriage was announced and published in the London Evening Standard, dated Monday, 6th of April 1914. This was wartime, and the announcement read, "A marriage has been arranged and will take place, but very quietly." Very quietly. I thought that was, the wartime, they didn't make a fuss of these things. Between Robert Leal Germain, Lieutenant Commander, Royal Navy, eldest surviving son of the late Captain E.J. Germain, and Mrs. Elizabeth Maud Germain of Walmer Lodge. And Kathleen Eade, he married Kathleen Eade, eldest daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Robert Martin of Alderden, Walmer, Kent. I can only imagine what he and his new wife must have been feeling and what they foresaw for the future. With war pending and Robert appointed to HMS Hercules of the 2nd Battle Squadron, his wife may have remained at 3 Sandown Road or perhaps stayed at Alderden, Walmer, with where her parents live. This is a picture of Lieutenant Robert Leal Germain proudly posing, 3rd from the left. Oops, sorry. I knew I'd do that. 3rd from the left, on the deck of HMS Hercules with fellow officers and with John Jellicoe, now Admiral of the British Grand Fleet. There you can see him there. This is just one I threw in because I couldn't afford not to. It's such an amazing photograph. I'm not sure it's HMS Hercules, but what discipline it must have taken to set up. Yeah. And here is a photo of the fleet en route to the Battle of Jutland. During the battle, the captain wrote in his logbook that the Russian naval attaché, supposedly with limited English, surprised those on her bridge when soaked by an enemy near miss by saying, "How you say, bugger?" The Battle of Jutland, May 31st to June the 1st, 1916, lasted just 2 days, was a naval engagement of the west coast of Denmark and was the major encounter between the main British and German fleets in World War I. Admiral Jellicoe commanded the Grand Fleet during the battle. Both sides claimed victory. Germany because it destroyed or damaged more ships, Britain because it retained control of the North Sea. It was a naval battle. It was the largest naval battle of the First World War, involving 250 ships and around 100,000 men. Over the course of the battle, there were periods of intense action and inaction. In the end, 6,000 British and 2,500 German sailors had died. The British lost 14 ships and the Germans lost 11. What a price. If you want to learn more about the Battle of Jutland, this book by John Sutherland and Diana Canwell is an excellent read. Robert received the Order of St. Anne, 3rd class, with swords, conferred by the Russian government on officers of the Grand Fleet for distinguished service rendered at the Battle of Jutland. He was promoted to the rank of commander on the 30th of June, 1917. On the 14th of July, he was appointed from Hercules to the armoured cruiser Minotaur and as executive officer. Hercules was one of 12 in Colossus class dreadnoughts commissioned in 1911. At the end of the war, she took the Allied Navy Armistice Commission to Kiel, where ironically she was later scrapped. On the 31st of July 1921, Robert was lent to the Royal Canadian Navy to take command of the boys' training establishment in Halifax, Canada, for 2 years. I think this is where he might have fulfilled his gift for shaping the lives of the naval recruits and inspiring them for a hazardous future life. Before leaving for Canada, Robert and Kathleen had 2 children. In 1916, they had a son, Robert Lloyd Valentine Germain, and in 1919, a daughter, Elizabeth Joan Germain. They were both born in England. In 1921, his son, aged only 5 years old, sailed from England to Canada on the Corona to join his father. A long way for a little boy to go. Robert Jr. was to follow in the naval family tradition. And on the 28th of November 1938, on the ship Empress of Japan, he went to Honolulu, Hawaii. He was recorded as being a paymaster sub-lieutenant in the Navy again, in the Canadian Navy, and promoted to temporary paymaster lieutenant on the 14th of February 1941. Dangerous times. In 1950, their daughter Elizabeth married Nicholas Ober Wilby in Vancouver, and subsequently Robert and Kathleen became grandparents to Derek. Robert Sr. retired at his own request on the 10th of July 1922, eventually being promoted to the rank of captain retired. Upon reaching age 45 on the 11th of November 1927. In June 1940, during World War II, he was a temporary captain, and on 14th of February 1941, he reverted to the retired list. They retired early. It must have been a very hazardous and grueling life. To summarize them, to sum up, what my research seems to suggest is that a democratic line between the rich and poor is not set in stone based on housing. Circumstances fluctuate for all of us in any era. These may affect the young, the adventurous, the growing family, the retired, and the elderly at different stages in their lives. For example, an officer in the Royal Navy in his youth may not always need to maintain a large household. He may spend most of his time at college or sea, maybe taking lodgings when on shore, or as in Robert's case, live in a smaller house owned by his father until his circumstances change. With house research now being incorporated in school national curriculum, Key Stage 1 to 3 programs, I hope that teachers can deal with these variations without prejudice. I have here some useful books and websites. It's probably too small for you to read, but I can either give you copies of them at some time, or you can have a look at them on my computer later. Right. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year! Thank you. Thanks very much.